it all behind. Let it all go. It's not worth it anymore. You can't convince them or change their minds. It's hard to be kind. You're accused out of thin air. Some people, you know them, and they won't know you. Friends can easily become a foe. Blood sometimes just won't let you go. When the wind blows and it rains, and you don't know why it pains you so, and it won't stop for a while. Just hang in there, it's worthwhile. To you, I know it's hard. Find something to do to keep yourself on his back.
Man, absolutely gorgeous conditions here in Iceland. A little cold, as you can tell, but it doesn't get much better than this. This is going to be the first shot, the first part of the first episode in Iceland. It's been pretty difficult because of the wind, but it's not too windy right now. Trying to record with the lapel as well. I hope it works out. I might have to voice over this whole thing. Not entirely sure. Regardless, I just took 3 different shots. Couldn't really include you along the way. The light was fading pretty fast. It's actually only like 4:30 p.m. right now, but the sun starts setting at like 3 p.m. The light lasts a long time, but it's so early that you got to be there early. You got to be ready. I actually started on the wrong side of the waterfall, had to drive to the other side. But thankfully, I think I caught it in time, got out here, got my composition set up, and I took 3 different shots. I took some amount of pano from left to right to capture everything vertical, 16 millimeters. Curious how that's going to stitch together. I shot 1 wide angle photo that looked pretty good. And the reason it's difficult is because the sunlight, or the light that was hitting the clouds, was on the right side of the frame, but a lot of the weight of the waterfall is on the left side of the frame, made it somewhat difficult. And then the last one I shot was just further to the left, trying to get that sky in. Not entirely sure which ones are going to work, but I will talk about them after this, and I'll probably do a voiceover talking about those photos and how they turned out. So stoked to be here. It genuinely just feels like cheating. It's a little unfair of how easy it is to just park, walk over here, and take shots like this one. Anyways, stay tuned. Hope you enjoy my explanation of the shots, voicing over them. Couldn't really include you for very much outside of just some B-roll shots and this. So thank you. Here they are, and more Iceland stuff. Pretty stoked. This is I mean, just like, yeah.
It's very difficult for me to show you what I was doing, mostly because of that fleeting light. So we're just going to talk about a few of the shots we got right there in 𝐒𝐫 in Iceland. Let's jump into Lightroom right now. All right, here's that wide shot that I took that I talked about in a single frame, and I'm just not in love with it. Obviously, it has a lot of cool elements in terms of, well, the waterfall is pretty awesome all in itself, but cutting off this bottom half here just doesn't do it for me. In the next image I show you, we solve that problem. So right after this, I took a 7-shot vertical panorama bracketed. So this is a 7 shots panorama with my camera turned to portrait mode, and then they were all bracketed as well. So this is my brighter exposure, and this is my darker exposure. The first thing you're going to notice is all of this white space on the sides, and that's because of that distortion from that wide angle lens and how it puts it together. I didn't end up using the warp tool in Lightroom to stretch everything because I wanted to stretch it myself to have a little bit more freedom in terms of how the final image looked. So what I did is I took this exposure and this exposure into Photoshop, and I luminosity masked those together plus a few other things to create the image that I wanted. The biggest thing that I did in Photoshop, though, besides blending them together, was stretch the image exactly how I wanted it to look, trying to make the proportions look correct, but also maybe fit a specific square type or 4x5, 5x7. So those are the two images I used to blend together, and the image that I came away with, plus some Lightroom adjustments, were this. Now, you're going to notice a few things. Obviously, there's slightly more sky in this particular image than you can see in this. That is because I created it. And you're also going to notice, as I keep talking about this, that I got pretty creative and had a lot of creative freedom with this particular image. So I think if you walked away with just this image, it would be fine. But the thing that bothers me the most about this image is just how much room there isn't, basically the absence of room between this ledge and the waterfall here. And I really just didn't like that. It just didn't have enough room to breathe, even though we can see where the waterfall is going. Secondly, I don't like how distorted this looks. And that happens because you're shooting on 16mm plus trying to combine those panos together, and it's doing its best job. But it was not this big. This looks very distorted because it's at the very bottom of the frame. It was something I didn't really like. One solution I could do to fix this is I can just squish that part in Photoshop, just the bottom half. But what ends up happening is if I squish that bottom half, is there's just not enough room in the bottom of the frame. This just gets minimized, and then the bottom of the frame is basically just this waterfall and that ledge. So something I wanted to try was just removing part of the ledge and giving a little bit more room to breathe for that waterfall. And this is what I came away with. Now, I like this much better than the last one, mostly because it gets rid of that distortion and it gives more room to breathe for that waterfall. But it creates its own problem, and that is this complete dark space down here, which basically has nothing in it. And while that can work, I honestly might end up using this image in some things. I wanted to keep messing around, expanding, trying different things. So what I did was I actually took the best of both worlds, and I took a little bit of that ledge and I moved it to the left and kind of filled in that black space, but still gave all of this room to breathe for the waterfall. Now, is it perfect? No. But in my opinion, it took a good image or an okay image and made it just a little bit better in terms of the composition. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, that's cheating. This is just turning into digital art. And you're not wrong. Well, you're kind of wrong if you think it's cheating. In my opinion, you're allowed to do whatever you want to your photos. My biggest thing is that I like to disclose it. I like to talk about it. I like to tell people, well, this was the image and this is what I did to the bottom of it. And you can take that however you want to take it. But for me, this particular image was made a lot better by trying to fix that bottom half. And the other thing is, half of that problem is caused by the distortion of the lens and the limitations I have as a photographer. Now, moving it, well, that was what I chose to do. One other thing I want to mention about this composition is that the weight of the image is a little weird. So what I mean by that is a lot of the weight of the sky is on the right-hand side here, but a lot of the weight of the image is also on the right-hand side. I actually had a member suggest a good solution for dealing with this compositional problem of how much weight is in the sky versus how much weight is in the foreground. And it was to take this particular image and crop out a little bit of the left-hand side like this. And I actually think this is really nice. I'd probably also crop this in. And now the sky isn't overweighted compared to the rest of the image. Before, we had a lot of stuff on the left-hand side, but not as much stuff in the sky, because you remember me talking in the video about trying to deal with that the sky was on the right hand of the frame and I wanted to capture all of the waterfall, but it was hard to get the sky to balance correctly with the waterfall. And I think this is a really great image. You have everything that you need in the foreground that leads into the background. The one thing I would probably change is I would need to stretch out this right-hand side. So if you can hypothetically say that I only had this much of just the waterfall, that's about how much I would want, but stretched to the right hand of the frame to match the sky where it is right now. But that's a different topic, and it was just something I wanted to mention dealing with this particular composition because it was difficult to try to balance in the field, but also in the edit. Remember, we started with this, and I fully stretched it out to look like this. All right, so I hope that little explanation was helpful in visualizing and just seeing what the final images look like and kind of the creative freedoms I took to combat some of those issues that I was having in the field. Anyways, if you're enjoying, you can like the video. If you're loving it, you can subscribe. The next stuff, I don't really talk a whole lot about photography stuff. It's just a lot of beautiful shots of Iceland mixed in with some of the final photos that I ended up getting. So, thanks for watching and enjoy.
Get to you. I know it's hard. Find something to do to keep yourself on his back. When the world gets mad, what you gonna do? You're not young anymore. It's all